Checked. Oh. I got a bigger voice than I thought I did. Give me a little bit of more bass in there, a little less treble. That'll help us out too. It'll make me sound like Elvis, so if we do that. But anyway, welcome to the 92nd District State Representative Candidate Forum. I'm Pastor Walsh. I'm the pastor here at Lighthouse Baptist. I'm your host and moderator for the evening. Before I forget about it, if there's an issue, there's restrooms right behind those double doors there where it says exit. Over there on the side, and right there to your right, and around the corner to your left. And so they'll make yourself use of those. First, let me say how pleased I am that you made the effort to be here this evening. It's an honor to have you with us. I'm grateful for a community that's concerned and involved enough with the governing of the policies for our state to make the effort to be out on a Tuesday evening. I'm also excited we have all 6 candidates for the state representative for the 92nd District present with us tonight. And so let me introduce them quickly. We have, first of all, in alphabetical order, Dan Almany on my left, Mark Anderson, Matthew Davis, Holly Kelly, Zachary Kyle, and Chris Wyatt. Now, I have no reason but to believe that all of these candidates have the welfare of the citizens of our state in mind and heart, and particularly the residents of the 92nd District. This position will require time and effort and probably some aspirin and Tylenol along the way. And yet here they are seeking the opportunity to serve us. I believe they want the best for us. The question is, what is their definition of best? And what is their philosophy and approach to reach those goals? Whoever is elected will be helping to make decisions for our state and particularly our community. And those decisions may be in force for many years and affect generations of Pennsylvanians. They can set the future course for our society, and this could have lasting ramifications. And thus, who we place in this position can have a dramatic impact on our children and even our grandchildren. Decisions made in the State House of Pennsylvania may even affect the philosophy of life for our children. Abraham Lincoln said the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. Some may say that a church has no business being involved in politics. Just for your information, John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, said, "Providence has given to our people the choice of our rulers, and it's the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers." Now, I'm a pastor, so I'm sorry, but this is our private property, so I'm going to say it that way. But that was John Jay's words. Politics is involved in the personal welfare of all citizens. Thus, it becomes the business of all of us. And, of course, when I became a pastor, I didn't lose my rights as a citizen. And I understand that we will not all have the same values and priorities, but we're not here this evening to debate those, nor to attempt to change minds or opinions, but to simply understand where these candidates stand on the issues so that we may all make informed decisions concerning our leadership. Tonight, the candidates get to have their say. On April 23rd, we get to have our say at the polls. So I encourage you to take notes, make a list on your preferred candidates when the evening is over. If you don't have one of those sheets and you like to, we can give you one of those and pens. And somebody, in fact, you want to just slip your hand up, somebody will come by and give you one, and you can make notes on those things. Again, some may think it inappropriate for the church house to hold these things, but years ago, the church house was the only house big enough to hold everybody, so they did it. Now, I also want to remind you that we are on church property, and so therefore it's private property, and we want you to abide by our rules of decorum. And if you have difficulty doing so, we'll ask you to personally refrain from such activity. And if you refuse, you may be asked to leave. I don't want to do that. We've done this before. We've never had to do that. I certainly don't want to start tonight. We're all friends here. We're all neighbors. I think we can keep it that way. But we can disagree without being disagreeable. So let me lay down some ground rules for our evening so we can accomplish what we came here to do. I'm going to encourage the audience. Some of you have been here before. You know what I'm about to say. I'm going to encourage the audience to refrain from responding to the answers of our candidates. I do not want us to influence their answers. If they realize that an audience seems to like a certain twist on the answer, they may adjust their answer in an attempt to please the crowd. If a certain answer seems to agitate the audience, they may avoid saying such things even though it was part of their position. And so, I don't know about you, but I want them to be oblivious to our thoughts so that we will have true response of their thoughts. And in that way, we can actually see what they truly think, and we can vote accordingly with some sense of confidence. Candidate has the word candid in it, and we want them to be candid in their answers. We probably will not get to every question. I'm hoping we will. And we're not going to have time to discuss specific programs or budget items necessarily, but we are going to be looking more at the philosophical issues, vision for the state, and I believe you'll see where we're going here quickly. Also appreciate if we each use polite demeanors and language. And again, since this is private property and it happens to be the church, if I would appreciate if you allow us, I'm going to pray, and if you're not a prayer, that's fine. If you can just be quiet for a second, I appreciate that. And we're going to have a word of prayer as we start. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I thank you for the great nation that you've given us. We are honored and privileged to live in America, although America has been going through some changes here in recent years. Lord, I pray that you'll give us wisdom and understanding in all that we need to do. Lord, give us the right thoughts and the right mind, the right attitude here this evening. Pray that you give us discerning minds and hearts, and pray that you will direct us in all that we do and say here, and that everything be done in decently in order and pleasing to you, and we'll give you the praise for it all in Christ's name. Amen. Now, each candidate will be given equal time to answer each question. The time limit will be given according to the question. It will change a little bit. If you cannot answer within the allotted time, we will assume you haven't yet had time to consider it. That's okay, but that's where we're going to be. Now, we'll begin with the first candidate, Mr. Almany here on the left, and follow through each of the candidates. And then the next question will begin with the second candidate, Mr. Anderson. And we'll go around and come back around and loop around each time and so forth each time. Our candidates will not... We're not given the questions prior to this event. So give them a little grace, all right, as they spontaneously express their positions. Again, and by the way, when we're finished here, they have tables set up there. You will have some time. We're not going to close the doors right on you. If you want to go ask some questions, you want a secondary question, maybe you want to go get a sign and put in your front yard. All those things are there. You'll have some time to meet with them. Again, let me say it's not a debate, and we're not here to change minds, but to communicate their positions. Now, in order to keep things moving, please make yourself aware of the digital timer on your left on the monitor. There will be a 10-second warning, which means it turns yellow. Okay? 10-second warning when you're coming to the end of your time. If you go past your allotted time, it'll turn red when you get to your end of your allotted time. If you go past more than 10 seconds, your mic will magically turn off. I don't know about you, when I hear these debates on TV, they ask one candidate the question. I wanted to hear what this guy over here said, too, and so that's why I'm going to do the things the way I do here this evening. All right, so remember that there's nothing wrong with with knowing what you think and being able to express it. If someone else has already said what you would like to say, we don't have to use your entire allotted time. We'll get out of here sooner. Your answers may sound similar, so that's okay. Question number 1 is simply to introduce yourself, give a little background, and reasons for entering the race, and you're going to have a minute and a half. That's 90 seconds for your opening statement. So, Mr. Almany.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Almany. I'm running as a Democrat in the race for PA House seat number 92. I was a candidate in 2022, and I first decided to run basically because I was two reasons. One was my daughter and the concern that I have for her future. And 2, it was because democracy doesn't work if people don't have a choice. So it's very important that we give people a choice on our ballots. And, we have a lot of choices this year, especially with that. I believe in our education is one of the most important issues we face. I also think that every issue is an economic issue. I hope that by the time we're done tonight, you'll understand that many of the issues we face are driven by the economic choices that we make and that our leaders have made up to this point. So, unlike Pastor did say, I am here to change hearts and minds. With that being said, I look forward to this evening's discussion. Thank you very much.
My name is Mark Anderson. I am a history teacher at Northern High School. First, I want to thank Lighthouse for hosting this. I think this is a great opportunity for folks to come out and hear from all candidates and hear what they have to say and what their basic philosophies are for the state of Pennsylvania, for the 92nd District, and overall for America. The final line of the Declaration of Independence says, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. The founders believed that those who run for political office had to be honorable. They also believed that people had to sacrifice something. I did not want to originally run for state representative. Community members approached me, asked if I'd be interested. I said no. I love my life. I love being a teacher at Northern High School. However, 4 students changed my mind. And so the reason I'm running is for them, for my students, and to put honor back into our system. Because our system doesn't work if it's not honorable. And if we're not sacrificing something to run for office and to make decisions on other people's behalf. Thank you.
All right, my name is Matthew Davis. I'm 22 years old. I have a car loan and student loans, and any competent financial advisor would call me stupid for getting involved in this. But I'm working hard every day to pay for gas and my bills so that I can do this. I was required to go on leave without pay from my job at the Capitol until this campaign ends, so I'm just working hard to make it happen. To me, this isn't a career to make money in. It's a privilege and a duty to represent the people. And as an Eagle Scout, I swore an oath repeatedly from when I started Boy Scouts until I turned 18. And part of that oath was to do my duty to God and my country to help other people at all times. That is my promise to you, to be your servant and voice, not a politician. And I'm running because, quite frankly, I'm worried about our future. And as a 22-year-old, I want to be able to raise a family and continue to call this community my home. And quite frankly, I'm worried about the way that our future is heading for Pennsylvania, for the nation. We have youth leaving this state for other states that have lower taxes and better opportunities. And we have an increasingly elderly population. And we need to focus on our youth and how we can help them so that we can continue to help our elderly. And I want to make that happen.
Good evening. My name is Holly Kelly, and I just wanted to thank you for being here this evening and being part of this process as a voter. I'm a fourth-generation Northern York Countyan. I'm a small business owner of Golden Rentals of Dillsburg, and I have 30 years of experience in the telecommunications industry. And I'm an 18-year member of our Dillsburg Borough Council. Public service has been a calling, and I have been stepping up every step of the way so that I can serve my public. My background is diverse and steeped in the rich values of Central Pennsylvania. My parents instilled a simple philosophy: be kind, be just, and work harder than everybody else. As an elected member of Borough Council, I've worked on land development, police contracts, funding for fire companies, and moving our borough forward without raising taxes but once in 18 years. I've been awarded the designation of pro-life, which is the highest rating given out by the PA Pro-Life Federation. I will protect our Second Amendment, and I do support law enforcement. As an experienced leader, I have the background, I have the relationships, and unwavering determination to be your next state representative. Please vote for me on April 23rd. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. And this is how democracy works, and it's encouraging. My name is Zachary Kyle, and I'm running for the 92nd House seat on the Republican ticket here. I'm a husband to a beautiful, amazing wife, dad to 3 kids who are incredible, a deacon at our church, a founder of a not-for-profit, and a financial advisor. And I first got into politics as the Northern York School Board. Scott Perry came to our church and he said, we need people that are committed to their principles and convictions. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, no idea what it meant at the time. And, but we ran. And so I won the school board, and it was encouraging. And so I've seen firsthand what works and what doesn't work. But my job as a financial advisor for the last 15 years has been to listen to people, small businesses, families, and find out what's hurting and how to find a solution. And so we find our state at number 47 in fiscal stability, number 46 in infrastructure, 38 in economic stability, and our neighboring cities are starting to be welcoming cities for illegal migrants that will spill over to where we are at. We need someone willing to listen, but to fight to solve these issues. I've cast the hard vote on school board. I've been the lone member that said no, and I will work every day to help the 92nd and for your families. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Thank you all once again, as all the other candidates said, for coming tonight. I'm Chris Wyatt. I'm a retired U.S. Army colonel. I spent 36 and a half years supporting defending the Constitution, 23 of those years overseas. I'm in the race because I'm apoplectic and heartbroken over what I've done my entire life, and has it all gone down the drain. The Constitution is under assault by the state government, excuse me, and by the federal government each and every turn. During the lockdown, this state violated the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Constitution and the Constitution of the United States with a lack of due process. Governor Wolf shutting down your businesses and causing you to lose your life's earnings while he kept his business open. At the national level, the government's spying on its citizens, censoring us, and I can't stand for it anymore. I've been in Pennsylvania now. I've been back. I lived in Scranton when I was a kid. I've been back for 9 years since the Army sent me here from Ethiopia. And I am a Pennsylvanian by choice, and I'm a 17th generation American. My ancestors arrived at Jamestown in 1621, the last one in 1849. And I take the Constitution to heart. Our freedoms and liberties are at risk, and someone with the passion who's served that's willing to take that chance to do the right thing morally and justly. And that's why I'm doing it. I heard a comment from a politician in the State House this week on a video that the $8 billion rainy day fund is just a big pile of money sitting there. No, ladies and gentlemen, that's your money and my money, and it should be put to good use, not for politicians who just want to waste it. Thank you.
All right. We're going to start with Mr. Anderson here for the second question to start with. It's 60 seconds here, and I don't think we may not take all of this, but let me give you the question. This is, again, kind of a general question, getting ourselves rolling here. What do you believe is the responsibility of a state representative, and what do you believe is the character of the relationship between the state representative and its citizenry?
Well, I believe any representative on any level, from school board to Congress, is to speak on behalf of people. And that is not always to do exactly what they want them to do, because you owe people your judgment. And that's why people elect you. But you should be knowing exactly what it is they believe and they want you to know and what they want you to do. So you have to be present. I believe the main job of a state representative is to spend as much time or more in their community than they do at the state capitol. You have to know people. I've spent my whole entire life building relationships. My job, my life's work is relationships. And it's really not that different from a state representative. And if you don't have the ability to build those relationships, you will not be successful in representing the people that you have taken an oath to represent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark hit the nail on the head right there. The representatives need to know what the people want to see happen in the government, and they need to be able to act on it. A representative needs to be accessible, and that goes two ways. The representative needs to be in the community, being accessible and engaged out in the community, being involved in service and everything else going on. But the representative also needs to be in the district office, ready to be acceptable and receiving of the people and their needs. And so one of the things I've talked about is, were I to be elected state representative, would be moving the district office from Dillsburg into Lewisberry or somewhere around there, so it's in the center of the district and it's equally accessible to all the people in the district. So that way they can come to me, I can come to them, and I'm able to engage with the people, know what they need, and get it done.
Thank you much. Mrs. Kelly.
Thank you. Yes, as a representative, we must put the constituents first. And during the 18 years that I've been on Borough Council, I have done just that. And for those 18 years, I have been upfront, I've been present, I've been at all the meetings to make sure that I am listening to what their concerns are, balance that with the grant processes and the ways to spend their dollars. So I have been beholden and frugal to how we have used those dollars over the 18 years that I've been on council. I've also been part of what's called the Dillsburg Area Community Association, and we put on our annual Pickle Drop, Pickle Fest, Light Up Night. So if there's something that takes place in our community, I am there not just organizing, but helping out. I've also been extremely active in our Republican Party here in York County, and I have been out there every single election for the past 15 years, getting your candidates in front of you to make sure that you know who you're voting for, to make sure that I'm putting out their yard signs, getting their petitions signed, and I have been extremely active across the state. As part of the Ann Anstein program, Women of Excellence in Public Service, I have gained those relationships across the state with the policymakers and the decision makers. So I have proven myself as a community leader.
All right. Mr. Kyle.
Yeah, so the relationship between the representative and his constituents should be based on trust, but also respect. And so I started out as a financial advisor at 21 years old, and so I've heard it all. I've worked longer for my money than you've been alive. I've got socks older than you, and yes, it's all true. But that was my life. My life was built on building relationships and service. And sometimes it took 4, 5, 6 years for that relationship to come through. But from the very beginning, our family has just sacrificed, and it's not just me, it's, my wife is fully supportive. You get one, you get us all. And so to be present in the community, to be out there, somebody called my cell phone and they said, well, I didn't expect to get you. And I thought, well, that was kind of weird, but you should. Like, you shouldn't expect to get, an 800 number or a voice recording. It should be us. And so making ourselves present and out there is what I would look to do every day.
All right. Mr. Wyatt.
Well, I can't disagree with the other candidates up here. It's important to be accountable, be present, and be involved. If you look up the role of a representative in Ballotpedia or somewhere online in a dictionary or an encyclopedia, you'll find that the role of a legislator is to make laws. But laws become oppressive at some point. Legislators are also responsible for removing laws that are burdensome, and that's something that needs to be addressed. But you need to be present, you need to be accessible, and you need to be accountable, fiscally and also in person. In my entire life, that's what I've done. People's lives were on the line each and every time I made a decision around the world and here at home. And each time I had to be accountable. When you're accountable for someone's life, it's harder to come up with a more serious responsibility than being accountable for someone's life. At the National Security Agency, I accounted for $3 billion of expenditures. No questions asked where the money's at. It's all accounted for. And I led the rebuilding of the Armed Forces Library, where I had a $254 million program, can account for every penny. Your representative should be there and should be accountable to you and accessible to you and transparent. Thank you.
Thank you much. Mr. Almany.
Being a representative is about servant leadership. It's that simple. We are supposed to answer to the voters. Unfortunately, that's not the way things work in Harrisburg. You may or may not be aware, but our current representative has been bought off by billionaires and special interests. So we have to really look at who is running the show in Harrisburg, and we need somebody with the moral fiber and character that will stand up to those people when they want to come writing their big checks so they do not sell our communities out.
All right. One last question. This is a lightning round on this one here, okay? But these first few questions are kind of a get-to-know-you, warm and fuzzy ones, okay? We'll get to some more other ones that will drive you a little more insane a little later. But the next one, 30 seconds only. Quickly, not going to try to make this big, long history lesson. Is there anything or any person that is a source of wisdom or philosophy that you look to for guidance in your decision making? If so, who or what? And Mr. Davis, we begin with you.
That is a very complex answer. I mean, there are a lot of different philosophers and critical thinkers throughout the course of history that I would look to and emulate, but I think the greatest collection of thinkers would be the Constitution by example. It is the defining document of the greatest nation in this world, and it was put together by the greatest thinkers of the time. And I think that as Americans, we need to abide by that document, uphold it, protect it, defend it, and cherish it.
Thank you much. Mrs. Kelly.
I too would have a collection of people that I've met over my course of my life, whether it starts with certainly my parents and my grandparents, the local leaders that I have tried to emulate, people that are in this audience tonight that I value their opinions very much. So it has been a collection of people that I have taken from that I can't single one person out.
That's all right. That's
Thank
okay.
you.
That's good. Mr. Kyle.
Yeah, so first and foremost, when I wake up in the morning and I have my quiet time and my devotions, and that is where I know that if my relationship is right this way, I'll be able to serve others this way. So that's first and foremost. My wife is really good at motivating me when I don't want to be, and so she's always got an encouraging word or a good swift kick if I need it. But other than that, it would be my dad, and my dad taught me I better know what I believe and why I believe it, because it's going to come time where you have to stand on those principles.
All right. Thank you much. Mr. Wyatt.
Unfortunately, I grew up in horrible circumstances as a child, so I can't look back at my childhood to people that inspired me. In fact, most of my choices in life have been 180 degrees the opposite direction. And many people have inspired me through the years. Dr. Martin Luther King is a major inspiration for me. But also I look back to people like the philosopher Immanuel Kant from Germany, as well as Adam Smith, the famous economist, for my inspiration on my philosophy for the world. Contemporary leaders, there are many of them. Of course, I served in uniform and countless ambassadors and military leaders I could refer to. Thank you.
Thank you much, Mr. Almany.
Mr. Rogers, George Carlin, and Yoda.
No, thank you very much. Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Bartle, baseball coach and teacher. That's why I am a history teacher. Ronald Reagan, because I'm a true product of the 80s, born in 1970. My paternal grandfather and maternal grandmother, who stepped up when my family broke down and saved me from a spiral I was in. And then because I am an originalist and believe in the founder's view of this country, Benjamin Franklin said in his 13 virtues, the last virtue was imitate Jesus. So that is my main inspiration for life and why I'm doing this.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. I hope you had fun so far. 60 seconds, and we're going to begin with Mrs. Kelly. In recent years, there's been much discussion concerning election integrity and voter suppression. With another presidential election this year, do you believe that the elections in Pennsylvania are secure? What are your thoughts on early voting and mail-in voting? And are there any suggestions that you may have to enhance that security? Any of those things, if you'd like to share with us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So first and foremost, I would support voter ID. We are looking at voter ID today. There was some legislation that was signed today to make voter ID more prevalent. I would certainly support that. I would also look to removing the automatic voter registration that's currently being done at the DMV. I don't think that that's correct. I think that was circumventing the legislature to put that in the first place. And I want to make sure that those people, PA allows illegals to obtain a driver's license. And I don't think that is wise to have then the automatic voter registration tied to that. We also have the ability to establish an address just off of a P.O. box that looks like an address, and that's not correct. We had to make sure we have a physical address there. I think we need to also do some sampling of hand counting across the state so that we can also validate the machines that are taking place so that we have a little bit more trust. And once we chip away at each one of these things, we can bring our trust of our elections back. As far as the mail-in ballot is concerned, I certainly have supported the absentee ballot.
We ran out of time. I'm sorry. I think we've got the idea. Now, if I don't, I will be in here all night. I'm there. We will.
A lot of questions.
I just got the gong show hook.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome to Lighthouse Baptist. Yeah. Brother Kyle?
So you can't have half of a democracy thinking the election was stolen or rigged or robbed. It doesn't work. And so half of your population is then always questioning what is going on. So signature, verification is a way. Definitely, a photo identification to make sure that is the person. Have the county clean up the rolls, down to the precincts. If you haven't voted in the last 10 elections, maybe we need to implement something where you have to re-register. Things that are common sense solutions. My daughter loves to read. We go to the library. I have to present, well, I don't. My wife goes and presents her identification to check out a library book. But arguably, the building block of our democracy, you can go in unannounced and just, hey, this is who I am. The Constitution calls for an election day, not an election 3 days prior, 6 months after. We'll count it maybe, whatever. We can put somebody on the moon, but we can't tell you who won until 2 o'clock the next morning. So, just simple things like that we need to address.
Mr. White?
I'm a judge of elections in Carroll Township. Not a single Democrat or Republican in that township bothered to step forward to take that office because nobody wants to do it. I can attest to that polling station, the election is free and fair, and I have no concerns about the integrity of the election. That said, early voting is a farce. It is an undemocratic way to undermine elections. It favors the wealthy and the connected, who have the resources and money to flood mailboxes and street corners with signs and postcards, and attach an election before people get a chance to meet the voters. There's a reason the Constitution has an election day. It's a single day. Now, that doesn't abrogate the right to have a federal absentee mail-in ballot like I did for 30 years in uniform, being outside of Ohio all that time. That's a responsible way to vote. But jeopardy is attached, because if you stick a ballot in the Postal Service and you commit fraud, that's a 5-year felony conviction. And that helps protect our elections. 353 lawsuits were filed after Trump won election in 2016 to undermine our election security. I could talk about this for hours, and I have. That's all the time I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Almany.
Yeah, I think it's important to do a little history lesson here quickly. Act 77, which is the act that allowed for mail-in voting, was established by the Republican legislature in 2019. In 2020, all of the Republican elections were fine, except for the one that contested the presidency. Nothing was done in the following 3 years, despite having a majority in the House and the Senate, to correct any of the issues they brought about, concerns with Act 77. We do need statewide standards so that counties are not making these decisions. We also need to make sure that we have mail-in voting available, because especially for our first responders who work 12-hour shifts at a time, our nurses, our police officers, our firefighters, and to Mr. Kyle's point, there is signature verification. You have to sign the book whenever you go in to vote. That's done also when you fill out your mail-in ballot.
Voting should take a little bit of effort. So we allow access, but it should take a little bit of effort. It's a responsibility. We should not be having mail-in ballots for convenience. An absentee ballot already covers military, first responders, people who can't get to the polls. There's no need for mail-in ballots whatsoever. Actually, it's Article 7 of the PA Constitution says election day, not election season. So it should be an election day, absentee ballots for people who cannot physically get to the polls. It's common sense. An ID is a common sense thing. Think of all of the things that you need an ID for. To say that you have to prove who you are to vote, and the fact that there's opposition to that tells you exactly where we are within our democracy. Somebody should have to prove who they are. It's not a big ask to do so. And there are a lot of specific things that we can talk about here, but our elections are not secure. My son was registered in 3 states. He had a job he went to all around the country. He was registered in Florida, Virginia, and Pennsylvania at the same time. So anybody tells me they're secure, it ain't.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I don't want to echo my colleagues too much, because I feel very similarly to a lot of what has been said. We need voter ID. We need to get rid of the mail-in ballots because it doesn't make sense. And I mean, if you look at the voter registration for York County alone, the number of people I saw combing through that who have passed away or who have moved is ridiculous. So yeah, there's concerns with election security, and whether or not there is election fraud. I think one of the first and foremost duties of the government is to establish elections that the people trust, because if the people can't trust their elections, then what is the point of the government? It's a farce, because there's just no trust at all. And I'll stop there because I agree with a lot.
All right, very good. Thank you. I hope you're taking notes and so forth. And if anybody else still want a piece of paper to one of those sheets, we got them all lined up there. Anybody else would want one? You're going to get into a lot of things here. All right. All right, now 60 seconds for this next topic, and I guess we start with Brother Kyle this time. And another topic of discussion that rises up sporadically is the topic of term limits. Do you believe that term limits would have a positive or negative impact on the governing and welfare of Pennsylvania's citizens? And thus, do you support term limits, or would you not? Mr. Kyle.
I absolutely would support term limits. I think that's how people get comfortable, and they're now in there for 20, 30 years on an incredible Cadillac pension plan. But as far as I know, I'm the only candidate that has put on their literature that I would only serve, if elected and doing a good job and the constituents wanted, no more than 12 years. And I know that there are pension plans have been revamped, and so now, you have your option of 401k pension style, but we need to make sure that we are working every day for the constituents and not just sitting back and taking it easy. And so I would absolutely support term limits and would adhere to it myself.
Yes, sir. Mr.
Well, thank you, Zach. I'm 59. I have no intention of sitting in the legislature for 12 years. I'll tell you that right now. Okay? So I guess I'll need to put my legislature. Thanks for that, Zach. I have no intention of doing that. I do have the intention of going to Harrisburg and help clean up that swamp. As far as term limits, a lot of people argue that that's what elections are for. But I would argue that the two-party political system is entrenched interest, and it works anti-democratically. There's nothing wrong with term limits. For instance, at the national level, a member of Congress with 6 terms is 12 years, and a senator 3 terms is 18 years. That's 30 years at the national level, and people want to oppose that. I actually signed a pledge to support a Constitutional Convention, Article 5 Convention, for a single topic to hold term limits. It doesn't mean that I would necessarily vote in favor of it, but I do look favorably on term limits because of the entrenched interest. And you notice, nobody complains about the president being limited to 2 terms. We changed the Constitution for that. Why can't we hold our state and national leaders accountable for a shorter period of time, do like Davy Crockett, and go back into society?
All right, Mr. Albany.
Yeah, in 2022, that was one of my main points. One of my top priorities as a candidate was to impose term limits. Simply enough, if it's good enough for the president, it's good enough for everybody. There should not be, you should not have career politicians, especially as Mr. Wyatt said, the duopoly is partially the reason for that. So, But yeah, and term, it doesn't just end with term limits. There are several other reforms that I support, including extending the time period of representative. I think representatives should serve for 4 years and not 2. When you're doing elections every 2 years, you're in a constant cycle of running for office. Whereas if you make it a 4-year term, then maybe we can actually get some work done in Harrisburg, as opposed to just the constant recycling of our time.
Every member of the Second Continental Congress, or the Second Continental Congress, had other jobs. Our bureaucracy is the 3rd largest in the country, behind New York and California, and that is not a neighborhood that I'd like to live in. So we should certainly attempt to pass term limits. But the reality is, it's not going to happen. Do I support them? Yes. I'm not going to be there for a long time either. I have 2 kids that are just married. I'm going to have grandchildren. I'm not staying there. I don't want a career. In fact, I'm giving up a career that I love to do this. I'm sacrificing doing what I love every day to run for this. I have no intention to be a career politician. Todd Platts, when he was in Congress, introduced a term limit bill every single year of his 12 years he was in, and never got a co-sponsor. So I think there's an awful lot we need to do to reform government, support it, create the legislation, but there's a lot of more things that we can get done. But if we could have term limits in a perfect world, of course, okay? We don't want entitled politicians. We'd rather have them rotate out.
Mr. Davis.
Yeah, so like Chris, I also signed the pledge for term limits for the Constitutional Convention, solely based on term limits. It's important. I mean, if you look at DC right now, it is a paid nursing home. That's the simplest way to put it. And Harrisburg's not as bad, but it's similar. And it's something that needs to happen. And if you look at the writings of the founders and the people of the time, there's a reason why they didn't do it, and it's because they did not want to limit the time that good representatives doing their job could spend there. And I think if you can pass term limits that has a good behavior clause, for lack of a better term, where after your term is over, you run in the primary again, and if you win, let's say 75% of the primary vote, or 80%, some kind of threshold that is hard to get, but proves that you have a supermajority of the support of your constituents, then obviously you've done something right by them and deserve to keep serving and fighting for them.
Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I too actually do support term limits, and I put some self-imposed term limits on myself as I sit here and say I've been, in Dillsburg Borough Council for 18 years. At one point I said, I'm going to serve until I think it was 12 years, something like that, because I think that's enough of one voice, right? But at the same time, we understand that volunteerism is so hard to get these days, and you can't get anybody that's going to raise their hand and do the work for the selfless work. And in the borough's case, you certainly don't get paid for, it's a very small nominal amount of pay for borough council. So, I kept running because I care about my town. I kept running because I kept wanting to serve my constituents as to the best of my ability and help the town. But I do agree that from a term limit perspective, if you get in there and you get yourself entrenched and you get yourself extremely comfortable and indebted, then that is when things go sideways pretty quickly. So I would agree with term limits in that respect.
All right, very good. 60 seconds for next question. When I moved to Dover, Pennsylvania, from Maryland 20 years ago, I was floored by the taxes. Now, we understand that, of course, a lot of our taxes go to the local school districts. Some say that's the way they're supposed to be funded. Some say they're not supposed to be funded that way. My question is, do you have any thoughts on the current status of taxation in Pennsylvania and PA's fiscal condition? And do you offer any solutions to the problem? I know it's an awful lot to do in 60 seconds. But can you give me a ballpark direction of where you're headed? And Mr. Wyatt, we're starting with you.
Certainly, I can give you a ballpark direction where I'm headed. The state has $8 billion of your money sitting in a kitty, which is fine for a rainy day. But politicians in Harrisburg seem to think that that's just a pile of money. They can, mad money, do what they want with. That's not acceptable. Yes, it's expensive, but for the pastor, I'd recommend you move to Perry County. The taxes are a lot lower, just to let you know. Seriously, they are a lot lower. I'm considering. No, just kidding. But I oppose the inheritance tax. It's an immoral tax. It raises $1.5 billion a year for this state, and I think it's vile and repulsive. It forces people to sell their parents' and grandparents' life savings, everything they built, to pay taxes on a family farm or in a business that's transferred to them. It's immoral, and it should not happen. In addition to the inheritance tax, the fuel taxes in the state are absolutely bat crap crazy. We were the highest in the country. The state doubled that rate, and now we're second. Yay, California's first. Well done, California. Beyond that, we do have to fund schools, and that's a challenge, and that typically comes from property taxes and money comes from the state. But a lot of that comes from the federal government, which we don't pay attention to. So I would lower taxes and be fiscally responsible.
Mr. Olney.
Yeah, so obviously that's a large issue. Breaking it down, just to give you a couple thoughts, property taxes are one issue. Those are the taxes that we use to fund our education and our schools. It was recently ruled that last year, 13 months ago, that we are illegally funding our schools. Part of that is because for the 3 decades of Republican control, the legislature passed the buck on dealing with property taxes and passed that obligation down to our local school boards. Local school boards have not had any choice but to raise your property taxes to fund our education system. Secondly, there's a uniformity clause in the Pennsylvania Constitution that makes our Commonwealth the 4th most regressive taxed state in the country. So there's a problem there, and there's legislation that has been introduced to help combat that.
Sorry, a little fast on you. I'm sorry.
We can throw out a bunch of numbers, but it's hard to just throw out statistics without any sourcing of those statistics. What I would say about taxes is high taxes prevent growth. And the only way that we're going to get out of our economic problems and lower inflation is to promote growth. How do you promote growth? You deregulate and you lower taxes. It worked in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan did it, and it will work again. So we need to lower tax rates for regular people. And I know the left is always, well, corporate taxes, they don't pay their share, they don't pay their fair share. Then they talk about the Nordic model. Sweden has a 21% corporate tax rate, as does Norway and Denmark, because they understand when you bring business and jobs into a community, you have growth. When you have growth, you have prosperity and you have opportunity. So the way to provide that opportunity is to allow people to keep their own money.
Mr. Davis.
Yeah, so there's a lot of issues with the tax system that need to be fixed. Mark kind of addressed it right there, and I would agree with him. But I'd also like to point out the spending that we do in this state. The governor's current budget proposal includes $47 million just for the salary of senators and representatives. For your reference, if you don't know, there are only 50 senators and only 203 representatives. It also allots $41 million to general government operations for the Department of Ed and $20 million to general government operations for environmental protection. If we want to reduce taxes and we want to get stuff done, we need to cut the wages of our public servants, and we need to cut positions and wages from arms of the executive that fund unelected bureaucrats imposing regulations on our businesses, our schools, and our people in general.
Thank you. Mrs. Kelly.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, my husband and I own Golden Rentals in Dillsburg, and for 20 years we've been in business. We're celebrating our 20th year next weekend, so please join us. A little plug. But every day we fight to make sure that we're bringing our products and our services to the public at a fair price so that we can also keep our lights on and give our employees the payroll that they need and move our business forward. We are now faced with the House Bill 1773 that might raise our taxes from 3.07 to 12% on the small business. Well, how are we supposed to continue offering the products and services that we do at the rates that we do without having to raise our rates to our customers? And when we raise our rates to our customers, what does that do? It also says that we can't do some of the initiatives that we need to do to create jobs, to move our business forward, to donate to our school music program, our sporting programs, and all the other community things that we try to support. We also have a corporate net income tax right now that's at 5%.
Is your mic not working?
It's going to go down 5% every year until 2031. That's too long to wait. And the inheritance tax has got to go.
You better make sure that is her microphone working? It's changing on me from time to time. She's talking. No, it gets, I just want to make sure, I'm going to make sure that, because it was, okay, because all of a sudden I'm hearing you, then, is it on? Okay. But I feel like I'm afraid it went off. Are you having trouble hearing from time to time? That's not good. I am so sorry.
That's all right.
If you need to.
All right.
Just pass back and forth.
Okay.
Sorry, Callie.
You're funny. Never, I'm sorry.
Just don't start making.
Well, the worst thing is we're online, and so if you're online, they don't catch anything.
Oh, I see.
We are going to be, we are live streamed, so you can go back.
Okay.
While I'll give you a commercial break here a second. LighthouseBap.org. LighthouseBap.org. That's our. You can go to. It'll say previous sermons, but it'll be underneath. I'll take you to our YouTube channel, and you will find that there. And if you don't see it there, you can type this date. / okay, in the search and bring it up. All right, I'm so sorry. Mr. Kyle?
Thank you. So state government has increased spending more than 55% the last 2 administrations. We don't have a revenue problem in Pennsylvania. We have a spending problem, and that is at the core. So there are things that we just have to get creative, and this is the world that I've lived in every day, is talking to people and small business owners. You come out of Walmart and you're holding $400 in groceries in 2 bags. Inflation is just crazy, and so we need to open the economy. Competition is key, and things that I've done, even just on a small level, push to eliminate the per capita tax at school board. It's not a lot, but it's something that we could do to help put money back in the pockets of people. Inheritance tax was mentioned, gas tax. Again, I just go back to we don't have a we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And that's what we need to focus on, reining in spending and cutting just programs that don't matter.
Thank you much, Mr. White. Oh, you started us out.
I started this one out,
you
didn't I?
did.
But I'll take another.
That's all right. That's right.
So,
You did.
are you ready?
Now, this is going to be another lightning round. It's a big question, but having what we just went through, I'm thinking maybe we can make this go fast. Okay. I think this is a general philosophy question. And so we're back to Mr. Almany here. The term big government gets tossed around quite a lot. Do you see a large, diverse government as a safety net to meet the vast variety of needs in our communities, or do you see big government as an encroachment on private lives of our citizens? I'm going to try to do this in 30 seconds. So it's a basic, well, you need 60? I'll give you 60. Originally I had 60.
Let's do 45 and split the difference. That's
No,
compromise.
no,
That's what
I-
government's about, right?
Do 60. That's all right.
So I think what we need to do is, I appreciate the question, but ultimately it's the policies that are put in place that defines whether or not big government is encroaching or not. And, you know, who's to define what big government is? I mean, somebody just mentioned that over the past 8 years, we've seen an exponential growth in spending. Well, things have cost more over the course of the last 8 years. So, plus I go back to the fact that we've illegally underfunded our schools. So it's really more about specific policies and what those, and how they determine what we spend our money on. And again, it's about priorities. And you know, we talk a lot about, you know, and I think we're going to be getting to a lot of this freedom talk. And so it's a balancing act, you know, and it's about where we put our money that defines our priorities.
Okay, Mr. Anderson.
The government on the state and federal government is far too large and is outside what the founders intended. They were intended for limited government. Government exists to protect rights that are not from them, but are from God and nature, as the founders intended. Government, there are too many bureaucrats. I am an educator. There are way too many people that work for the Department of Education. We could cut that in half, and it wouldn't impact schools one iota. There are tons of, we need to start looking at these bureaucrats and these people who don't serve a purpose, unaccountable bureaucrats. And we need to have representatives and senators do their job. We don't need regulatory boards. We need senators and representatives to oversee these things and do their job. Not have somebody who is a family member or somebody who is a friend appointed to these commissions just so they can personally benefit from them. Government is far too large, and on day one, we need to start cutting it, and we need to look at every single department, every single branch of the state government where we can cut.
Mr. Davis.
So Mark kind of stole my thunder a little bit there. But absolutely, I will define big government. Big government is a ton of unelected bureaucrats making the decisions that is in the power of our legislators. It is simply legislators being lazy and handing their power over to these bureaucrats who are unelected and unaccountable, like Mark suggested. And I mean, the French thinker Jean-Jacques Rousseau once said that liberty is not the freedom to choose to do something, but it's the freedom to choose not to do something. And if we have bureaucrats telling us what we can and can't do, we are limiting our liberty. We have a problem with bureaucracy, and it's got to stop. It's too much spending, and it's too much limit on our liberty to make choices.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I do believe that any body that is this large, whether it's the state government or the federal government, is
Slide that over.
not effective.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you.
Just put it halfway between here. I think we'll be good.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I think any body, whether it's the federal government or the state government that is this large, that has layers upon layers, just becomes ineffective. It becomes there for the sake of just feeding itself and not necessarily being the public servants that it needs to be, and not being the career politicians that we tend to not like as well. So, no, I'm.
Mr. Kyle?
Yeah, it is far too large. And when you have appointed officials dictating what should happen instead of elected officials, that is where the issue comes. And government has its role to protect the rights that were given to us, not by ourselves, but through divine authority, and that is all that it should be there for. When you have bureaucracies upon bureaucracies and working in silos, and it just combats itself, government hasn't created anything. Government takes the things that we as individuals create. So absolutely, it is too big. We need to limit it from the EPA to, as I believe it was mentioned, Department of Education. There are everything. Nothing should be off limits as to what can cut.
Ms. Wyatt.
Well, there are two questions posed here, the first by the pastor and the second by Dan. And let me address the second one. Who is to define how big government is? Well, I will, as a historian and political scientist. Let's put a few things in perspective here about big government. Polities come together, the body politic, to select governments to represent their common interest, not to define their lives and dictate to them how they live their lives, how they worship, where they worship, and how they live in their homes. That's not the purpose of government. It is for, as the early founders said, to provide for the common defense, secure the general welfare and the blessings of liberty, promote general welfare and the blessings of liberty. The federal government has grown outrageously, courtesy of the 16th Amendment, which imposed the barbarian income tax, and the 17th Amendment, which stole the sovereignty from states by giving us direct election of our senators. Since then, it's grown out of control. In 2000, the federal budget was $1.8 trillion. This year, it's $7.4 trillion, and inflation was less than 2% most of those years, so it's not inflation or cost. The state government's budget has gone from $31 billion to $48 billion in 7 years. That's too much. We're not paying for that nonsense. That's taking our liberty away.
Did a good job there. Got it in there. That's good. All right. 60 seconds. This kind of goes along with that question. In the light of recent events, this is 60 seconds, excuse me, 60 seconds. And again, we will start with Mr. Anderson here. In the light of recent events, including the pandemic, should the governor or the state legislature have the authority to mandate personal measures such as vaccines and masks? Because we could be doing this all over again.
Mandate. Okay? The governor should not be mandating anything because he is accountable to the people. So he is not a dictator. He is beholden to the Pennsylvania state constitution. And to mandate business closures or to mandate vaccines or any other mandate that Governor Wolf or anybody else wants to come up with is a violation of the Constitution. And I'll use a great example of that. It has become when they shut down businesses, we're safe, we're safe. But the lady who had a single seat barbershop couldn't pay her mortgage, but everybody was safe. They wanted to shut down the schools. Yet our kids that went to school were still working at Giant, checking out the groceries of the people who wanted the schools closed. The governor does not have the right to mandate closures. And I'm a big supporter of medical freedom. You should not have to put something in your body that you do not want to be put in your body. Everybody is a big fan of choice until the vaccine. So, absolute.
Lost him. Oh, his time was up. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Mr. Davis, okay, I wasn't watching.
So I really don't want to sound like a broken record here tonight. I really feel like that's what it's getting to. Again, I agree with Mark. The governor is the head of the executive branch. The role of the executive branch is to execute the laws put forth by the legislative, not to establish mandates that the people have to adhere to. I mean, that's pretty simple to me. And when you're trying to shut down schools and businesses, I mean, it's hypocritical to pick and choose which ones when Walmart and Target are still open, but our local mom and pop shops are closed. That's not in the interest of public safety, because if anything, your local mom and pop shops are much safer to shop at than a big mega superstore. And I think giving that kind of power to the governor or any other executive member is foolish, and it goes against our values as an American democracy.
All right, thank you very much. Move that over there, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I think the shutdowns were absolutely unacceptable. The choosing of winners and losers by the governor was unacceptable. We will not allow ourselves to go back to that point if we ever have that again. We are strong enough, we are smart enough that we can keep our businesses open and still do it in a healthy way, that we can bring about what needs. It must be me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Ooh, wow. I'm so sorry about that.
Keep going.
The bottom line is absolutely not. We have the opportunity to make good choices to keep our businesses open, and there was no reason why we were so inhumane to our elderly and to our sick in keeping them apart from their families when they were suffering and when they were dying. That is unacceptable, and I will not stand for that.
Mr. Kyle.
Absolutely, the shutdown was unconstitutional, and we are smart enough to make our own decisions. So should the government mandate? Absolutely not. It shouldn't mandate what goes in your body. It shouldn't mandate if you have to wear a mask. I don't think it goes down to where even school boards should mandate that your kids wear a mask to school. And that's part of why I voted no. Parents are smart enough to know what their kids can and cannot do. And we are intelligent enough to make our own decisions. When you have an appointed official telling you you can't go to a family Thanksgiving because you might get someone sick, frankly, it's none of their business, and it's none of any government official's business. If you want to go to Thanksgiving dinner, have at it. I'm sure if your family doesn't want you there, they'll tell you.
Mr. Wyatt.
Well, this really opens up a can of worms, and one that I got censored for on social media repeatedly by simply stating facts as someone that studied epidemiology for 30 years and actually fought the battle against Ebola, HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria across Africa. When did this government at state or federal level become the experts in anything? These are the people who failed to warn us about 9/11 despite getting warnings from the intelligence community. These are the people who spent 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan pouring our national treasure down the drain and costing the lives of my comrades. These are the people who let 3 Mile Island melt down by negligence and lying about it in this state. When did the government become the experts, and why do we put so much trust in bureaucrats and governments? Think about that for a second. Mandates. We form governments to represent our needs. They don't exist so that we are their serfs, we are their peons. And that's important to remember. And every time I think I'm too big for my britches, I remember they left me on guard duty in 1985 to freeze to death. And I'll keep that in mind when I go to Harrisburg.
Mr. Almany.
All right. So, first of all, I'm really glad that we're all in agreement on medical freedom and big government, and I hope that continues as we get deeper into the debate. 4 years ago, it was tough. We really didn't know what was happening. We heard a lot of things. We had a lot of questions. I agree that in hindsight, some of the decisions that was made by the governor were probably not the best. But we have to, as a church, being in the church setting, it's important that we also give grace. So I do believe that at his heart, Governor Wolf did do his best to protect the majority of our populations. Could he have done a better job? Obviously. There was a lot of misinformation flying around at the time. It is what it is. The important thing is we take those lessons learned and move forward. And additionally,
You all right?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. By the way, though some of your answers I've mentioned before may sound redundant, the thing is we want to hear it out of each of your mouths and know where you stand, because you may be redundant in one area or another out of other point of view. So frankly, I know those sounds redundant. There's people who are adding up scores, and we want to hear each of these out of your mouths. And speaking of social media, Brother Wyatt, Mr. Wyatt here, our next question, 60 seconds, kind of going into similar transitional type of question here. We're starting with Mr. Davis. 60 seconds. Please express your interpretation of the First Amendment right of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press. This may include social media.
All right. The First Amendment is first for a reason. The founders determined that the right to free speech, the right to religion, the right to press was the ultimate freedom. That's pretty simple. When we start to limit speech, we start to limit the ability of people to ask questions. We start to limit the ability of people to think critically. And when we do that, we open a whole can of worms that I don't really have the time to delve into right now. But I truly believe that we should not be censoring free speech in any way. I mean, if your feelings are hurt, I'm sorry, but boo-hoo. Like, I might be the youngest person in this room, or actually maybe not the youngest, but close to youngest. I still remember going to school and being told that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I think that's a pretty straightforward idea, and everybody has a right to free speech. Get over it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna try this again, okay? Freedom of religion. To worship and to pray as you see fit. Freedom of speech, in order to say whatever you need to say, to communicate your thoughts, your feelings, without being oppressed by somebody else. And freedom of press, in order to be able to have full disclosure and hopefully in an honest fashion in representing those words by the press. I think they are, again, as Matt said, the First Amendment for a reason, and we need to support all of those items.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle.
Discussion is healthy and discussion is good. But we live in a day and age when there's none of that. It's people talking over, it's shouting, it's all of those things that not everyone's going to agree with everybody, and that's okay. But all of those come with an element of respect. I may not agree with what you say, I may not agree with how you worship, but I'm going to respect your choice and the rights that were given to you. I'll sit down and have a cup of coffee with any of you and discuss any topic. I may not agree, but we can at least walk away knowing that we've had a healthy discussion, and we've had this knocking on doors where you have that discussion and, okay, we're coming at it from different angles, but 5 minutes later, nobody shouted and yelled at each other, and we walked away best of friends. And it comes with just personal responsibility, respecting each other's rights to all three of those.
Thank you. Ms. White.
8 words. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The founders were wise in their interpretation of where we needed to go with this country. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are impossible without the Bill of Rights, guaranteeing our rights. Government doesn't give us these rights. This protects us from predation by the government, except today, when the government colludes with Twitter and Yahoo and Facebook to censor Americans, using them as agents of the government. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of the press are fundamental freedoms that belong to us. They're our rights, and the Constitution guarantees that the government cannot abrogate those rights, yet it does it all the time. Very frustrating to see that. These are not rights given to us, they're natural rights, they belong to us, and it's our responsibility to protect them. And the other thing is that the government cannot establish a state religion like the Anglican Church. We're protecting us from the conflation of state and the church. So that's what those things are, and you should be able to worship the way you desire.
Okay, Mr. Albany.
I'm not really sure I understand this question. It's the First Amendment, it's in the Bill of Rights, it's not really up for debate, especially considering, I think what you're alluding to is the federal Constitution and not the state.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So as a federal, obviously we would work to protect those rights at the state level. It's not really, I don't really understand the point of the question. So. Go ahead.
Well, that's a lot to unwrap. Speech, religion, and press, but I'll add another one to it, assembly. We have the freedom of speech to protect unpopular speech. Popular speech doesn't need to be protected. And when you put the freedom of speech, along with freedom of assembly, the founders originally meant it so that we could protest, so that we could be a naysayer, so we could stand up and say no. So it has to be, those two have to be protected without question. There's no compromise. As far as the freedom of religion, it's actually two clauses: free exercise and establishment, so that you can worship the way that you want to, and that the government can't establish a national religion. We often get that confused with separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution. And when Jefferson wrote the letter to the Danbury Baptists in 1802, he wrote it to guarantee the Danbury Baptists that they would be protected from the government establishing a religion and limiting their free exercise. What he meant was he wanted to protect faith against the government, not the government against faith.
Thank you. The question one was where it falls into social media, and that government, you might be surprised what one state may say that you can do here and do there and so forth and so on, and limit those things. And the other is during COVID, though Mr. Wolf said later he never stated that churches could not meet. All that was totally implied at the beginning of the time. And there's churches all over the state that closed up, were not free to assemble as they wanted to assemble. And in fact, there was threats on certain congregations for doing so. And so there is a state line there where the government could actually felt like it could close us down. So that was the point of at least one of the points of the question. All right, we have, this is kind of again, might be maybe the obviousness of the question may make it difficult. I'm only going to give you 30 seconds. Express your interpretation of the enforcement of the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Our first is Ms. Kelly. Do you believe we have the right to bear arms? Now, the state can make, I know we have, that's a national thing, but the states can make other laws that can limit those rights if they want. Where do you stand on the Second Amendment right to bear arms?
The Constitution says that I am able to bear arms, and therefore the state should not impede on that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is non-negotiable. The Second Amendment was put there so that we have the ability to defend ourselves against any infringement of our other rights. And so it is not up to the state to dictate whether I can or can't own anything, nor should it be up to the state to try to regulate necessarily the capacity of magazines or the cost of ammunition or anything like that. It's just a slowly chipping away at the rights that were given to us. And so without the Second Amendment, we don't have the ability to stand up against an oppressive government to defend our other rights.
A well-regulated militia being necessary for the nation. It's interesting the words that are in the Constitution to give us our Second Amendment rights. Again, they didn't give us the rights. We have that right. The government is recognizing that right. And why did the founders do this? Because they rightly recognized, looking at the history of England, that the government is a threat to its citizens from time to time. Therefore, we have the right to keep and bear arms. That's the reason we have the right. No question.
Mr. Almany.
Yeah, thank you for the distinction. Actually, I had a feeling this might come up today. So perusing the state constitution, I'd like to just read the state standard is, the right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. So that's the state, that's the verbiage that's in the state constitution. Now, what that doesn't mean is that we can't look at ways to make our communities safer, especially those that would help protect our police officers and first responders in making our communities, in helping to get some of these war weapons off of our streets.
Okay. Mr. Anderson.
The Second Amendment says for a well-regulated militia. A well-regulated militia were the citizens of each town, village, and community so that they could grab their arms if their own government was oppressive and defend their communities against the government. That's stated directly in the Second Amendment. So the right to bear arms is bigger than just having guns. The right to bear arms is to protect yourself against a progressive or an oppressive government. I just spent the last 9 days in Cuba. I had an 80-year-old lady tell me the first thing that Castro took from them, aside from their property, Bibles and guns.
Mr. Davis.
Every oppressive government in history has first taken guns from the people. That is fact. It's the easiest way to take over the people. The right to keep and bear arms is to protect the people. It is the strongest guarantor of our freedoms. It's also the best way for us to defend ourselves, which is supported by the recent Supreme Court cases, McDonald, Heller, and Bruin, and shall not be infringed. I think even a toddler can read that and understand it, and I think that gun control of any kind is unconstitutional and a big red flag.
All right, very good. This also is a short question. It's going to be, we could be here all night discussing this particular topic, but I think at this point we just need kind of which direction that you're going. And we will begin with Mr. Kyle. Where do you stand on fracking and oil drilling in Pennsylvania?
I think the quote is drill, baby, drill. I think that's how it goes. It is one of the things that has unleashed the economic potential of this state and generated thousands and thousands of dollars in revenue for local farmers and communities. I dealt with this as a financial advisor. When you all of a sudden you've had families that have worked for generations and never could rub two nickels together, all of a sudden get a check for several $100,000, it changes what they do. It also lowers the cost of fuel and inflation, which is everything is based on that. So yeah, absolutely open it up and do as much as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Wyatt?
This is one of the key issues that I'm concerned about here. This state is awash in energy. We are the nation's largest exporter of electricity. 20% of all the electricity in this country that is exported from one state to another comes from Pennsylvania. Yet this state's government and governors have attacked our energy industry and attacked it over and over again. I'm in favor of expanding fracking. I'm in favor of expanding coal mining. And I'm in favor of expanding the oil industry because those resources belong to Pennsylvanians and they should profit from them.
Thank you. Mr. Albany?
So once again, I'd like to point out that over the course, when fracking was first introduced, our Republican legislature failed us as constituents. We have the natural gas and the resources already in the ground. We had the opportunity to make millions of dollars off of those entities and corporations, and we failed. I am in support of stopping that. We need to invest in solar and renewable energies so that we can have good union-paying jobs that will help raise the middle class.
Okay. Mr. Anderson?
Our energy policy in the state of Pennsylvania and the nation as a whole has been dictated too heavily by radical environmentalists on the left. And so they have stopped and halted not only energy production, but all of the jobs that the blue-collar people, that the Democratic Party claims to protect. Those are the jobs that get eliminated. Coal miners aren't rich guys. The guys that are working on the pipeline that everybody wants to get rid of aren't rich guys. They're trying to provide for their families. So when we eliminate or regulate fracking, coal mining, those things, we're hurting the people that we.
Mr. Davis?
I'm a subscriber to the realist school of thought within international relations, which means that it's a dog-eat-dog world. Energy independence is crucial. We should be fracking. We have the natural resources. Use them. It allows us to control cost a little bit better, so foreign nations aren't raising the cost on us like they did with Jimmy Carter. And we are able to provide jobs, stimulate our economy. We are not dependent on foreign nations. There's a lot of benefits to producing energy at home and making use of it, and I'm in support of what's best for us and our people.
Amen. I appreciate you letting me rush you here a little bit. Ms. Kelly?
Thank you. You know, PA has to be more business friendly, and this is exactly one area that we have not been. We did have a fracking industry that was vibrant, that was working. We were laying the Keystone Pipeline. We were developing our communities in the upper part of the state because of that fracking, and I think we need to get back to that. We need to support fracking. We need to support local coal. We need to support hydroelectric. We need to support nuclear. We need to support all of those resources that we have under the ground in Pennsylvania so that we can bring business in. Whether we call it RGGI or whatever we're calling it today, those programs are stifling our businesses coming to this state because they don't know, you know, with RGGI and something like it being
All good things. You know, all those things are good, but be honest, when we walk out the door, they're going to say, were they for fracking? They were for fracking. You know, I feel like that's what's going to happen. And you know that's what's going to happen when you walk out the door. Yep, they were. No, they weren't. So anyway. Yeah, like that's right. All right. Changing gears here a little bit. With the things going on at our southern border, where do you stand on the issue of illegal immigration and the status of sanctuary cities in Pennsylvania? I believe we do have a few in our state. And where do you stand on that type of thing? And should there be such a thing, so forth and so on? Mr. White?
In 30 seconds.
No, 60. 60. I'm sorry.
Come on.
Did I say 30?
Come
No.
on, man. Come on.
Here's the deal.
All right, in a minute. All right. Sanctuary cities are an abomination. They encourage lawlessness. And people, especially Republicans, are afraid of standing up and telling the truth on this issue. This is the most generous country on the planet. Every year we naturalize 700,000 to 900,000 foreign nationals as American citizens by raising the right hand of citizens. We take in 150,000 refugees for asylum, most of whom are fraudulent asylum seekers. And obviously under Joe's administration, tens of millions of other people pouring across the border. These people are not migrants. They're criminal alien invaders who violated our sovereignty. And having sanctuary cities giving them refuge undermines the rule of law. You have to follow the rule of law. I have to follow the rule of law. People who come into our country should respect our country and do the same. Sanctuary cities are criminal activities, as are states like the state of Maryland, which issue identification to people who can't prove their provenance. They can't prove where they came from and what their real name is. I could show up in Maryland and get a driver's license by saying, I'm Juan Valdez, I sell coffee from Colombia, and they'll give me a driver's license. Unacceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Albany.
Give me your tired, give me your poor. This country has always welcomed those from other countries, mostly trying to earn a better life for them and their families. Certainly those, we have a process for that. And, you know, I would like to see those that come here follow that process. Sometimes that process is long and hard, and depending on where they come from, they may only have their clothes on the back. So we need to provide grace and opportunity for those folks. We need to give them a pathway to citizenship. But again, that's more of a federal issue. In the meantime, they need a place to stay. And this is always, Pennsylvania, I know, has always been a welcoming home for them. There's farms that depend on labor that others and Americans don't want to do. So that's an American value that I think we should hold dear.
The question was about sanctuary cities specifically. A city government does not have the right to override federal law. They are absolutely, positively beholden to the federal laws. They can't just override laws. As far as illegal immigration, it's no longer empathetic. It's not compassionate. What they're doing is they're going through the cartels. The cartels are running illegal immigration. And the cartels have these people, con these people into going to the United States, and then those people, even when they get to the United States, are absolutely, positively beholden to them. Go back to Cuba. The only way out of Cuba right now is through Nicaragua. They have to sell every single thing they own to pay off the cartel in Nicaragua to get them to Mexico, to get them to the United States. Then when they get somewhere along that path, when they're set back, they have nothing. The cartels are running this industry, and it has to stop, because it's not empathy. The people we're trying to help are being put in more danger by allowing this craziness to continue.
Mr. Davis.
So I'm going to emphasize a key word that was used a little bit earlier. Immigrants come here to earn. You earn the right of citizenship, and the immigrants that I know who have earned their citizenship, they're more proud and more knowledgeable than a bunch of American citizens I know. There's a reason for that, because they came here with the express purpose of becoming a citizen and achieving what used to be impossible, and they went through it legally. The whole illegal immigration situation is a mess. When you have tens or hundreds of thousands of immigrants pouring through a border, unvetted, unchecked, that's not immigration, that is an invasion. There are people in Chicago and people in New York City who are upset because their schools and their homes are being taken over. The hotels are being taken over just to give these people a place to live, and that's not our responsibility. It isn't. Illegal immigration has no place, and Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution protects the states from invasion, and as state representative, I would join states like Texas who are taking a stand and actually fighting against this.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Okay. The ghost flights coming in and sending people, God only knows where, from God only knows when, where they've come and where they're going, and there's no trackable, and there's no accountability to those people. In the sanctuary cities, we have drug abuse, and again, a total disregard for law and order, and we're putting stressors on our resources, on our schools, and on our economies in all of those cities. The legalization and the naturalization ceremony is beautiful, and these people come and they go through a process of learning about our country, and they go through a process and they have a pride in following that process and becoming a citizen of this great nation. And it is completely disrespectful to those who have worked to get to that status and to go through that ceremony to see all the flood of the illegal immigrants that are coming in. It doesn't mean we are without compassion to those who need to leave the oppressed areas, but we certainly cannot be displacing our veterans to make room for our illegals.
Let's go.
Mr. Almani said, give me your tired poor. Absolutely. Just do it legally. Some of my best friends are from Belarus and Russia, came over here with a suitcase in each hand and absolutely $0 to their name, and they did it the right way. Nobody's saying that's not okay. And the fact for a sanctuary city, it is hitting closer to home because the federal government hasn't done their job. Lancaster just said they are going to be a welcoming city. Drive down the streets and you see homeless people laying there. It's coming to ours if we don't do something about it. And if elected representative, there would be absolutely no state tax dollars going to sanctuary cities, because the people in 92nd should not be paying for what Lancaster wants to do. It shouldn't even be a question. And if your district attorney is not going to uphold the rule of law, then he should be fired and impeached.
All right, we're going to change subject to another hot issue, if you will. I'm going to give you, this is tough again. The reason I give you short time is because there's all these things that people want to hear. And they came to hear that particular item, and I don't want to be here till 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to be out of here by about 9 o'clock. But anyway, we'll start losing folks. Next question. This is a tough one for 60 seconds. But with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the issue of abortion has been sent back to the states. We could debate all the finer points on this, but What is your position on abortion? And are there any special conditions or exceptions that you adhere to? And I guess this brings us back to Mr. Albany, right?
Oh, I get to go first?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. All right. I want to take you back to about 10 minutes ago when everybody up here on this stage agreed that big government is bad and medical freedom is important and it shouldn't mandate what choices an individual makes. Government has no business in the abortion industry. What a woman does with her body doesn't matter. That's her choice to make, nobody else's. That's between her and her God, if she believes. There were 26,000 assault-related pregnancies in Texas just reported, 16 months after their abortion ban. We need to build a society that supports women, supports families, and supports children if the goal is to reduce the number of abortions that happen in this country.
The problem with that flawed philosophy is this. When we talked about big government, and we talked about choice, and we talked about mandates, it involved you, one person. That was a choice for you. This is
not a debate.
This involves two people, not one. It's a baby. It's not cells. It's not a fetus. It's a child. And so that child has as many rights as the female who is carrying that child. So there is an absolute difference in that flawed philosophy that it's the same thing. Because if somebody's going to give me a shot for a vaccine, that's me for me. If somebody wants to do an abortion, that impacts the baby that is inside that lady. So that is a flawed argument. I support life without exceptions, because if that child cannot pursue happiness if they do not have the right to life. Life first.
Mr. Davis?
So let's talk about medical freedom for a second. There is a big difference between abortion as health care and abortion as birth control. Big difference. At the end of the day, there should be no tax dollars or public resources going to fund abortion, because if you shoot a pregnant woman, you're getting charged with a double homicide, not a homicide, because that child is a person. It might be unborn, but that is a person. So while I will disagree that there are some exceptions, because I recognize that there is healthcare involved, I'm staunchly against abortion as birth control, and I only see abortion as a last resort option after going through different, I guess, introductory stuff, not introductory, I'm sorry, that's a bad word, but having different resources available, introducing yourself to them, knowing what they are, what the different options are, and only resorting to abortion as a last resort healthcare choice.
Ms. Kelly?
We must respect life first and foremost. And any woman that finds themselves in that difficult situation must have the compassion of their family and of their friends. But that compassion also starts way before that moment and becomes a family decision. And the actions, you must understand, are going to have consequences. I have received the rating of pro-life from the PA Pro-Life Federation, recognizing that my views are consistent with the Federation based on my completed surveys. I do agree with the exceptions of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. But after, we must uplift the family with the resources for caring for that child and for the supporting of the adoption process as well.
Mr. Kyle?
Pennsylvania is one of 4 states to allow abortions up to 24 weeks. So think of it this way. At 24 weeks, that baby has taste buds, fingerprints, footprints, its eyes react to light, and it can hear sounds through the womb. I guarantee you, if any of us were to be pinched or someone felt us, that we were just non-necessary, we would, disagree with that. There was just a bill introduced that would provide pain medications to the baby being aborted if needed. If it's not a person or a baby, why does it need pain medications? We're not talking about the freedom of choice. We're talking about the sanctity of life. And we need to protect life from the very beginning at conception. I understand it is a sensitive topic, and I'm not going to sit up here and judge for a decision somebody has made, but we need to make sure that there are resources available to help these ladies. And Governor Shapiro just eliminated millions of dollars from pregnancy centers to fund Planned Parenthood. It's not okay to protect life from the beginning.
Mr. Wyatt.
Wow, no easy questions tonight, eh, Pastor?
Yes, sir.
So, Roe versus Wade was an abomination to the Constitution. Article 10, or the 10th Amendment of the Constitution forbids the federal government from reaching into the sphere. It falls to the states. The Dobbs decision correctly returned that to the states. It's now under the purview of the sovereign states and territories, where it should have been. But in the interregnum, over 50 million American lives were lost in the womb in those decades. A large percentage of those are black Americans. A large percentage. Black Americans make up 12% of our population, yet they make up 35 to 40% of the abortions. It makes you question, what's it all about? Why are babies being harvested for body parts and fetal cells? I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and protect American lives, and I find it very difficult to be in favor of abortion. However, there are circumstances that were discussed up here: incest, rape, and when a mother's life is in jeopardy. I don't think our Creator intended for a mother to lose her life if it put her life in jeopardy. These are hard questions to address, but the decision is back where it belongs with the states, and Pennsylvania has a law 23 weeks, 6 days, and that's what it is. Nobody here is going to change that with the way the government's set up now.
Thank you. Forgive me, but we have to remember that our goal is to save both lives. I'm sorry, just parentheses, this is not them, this is me, this is the preacher talking. Our goal is to save both lives, not one or the other. Now, on the other hand, if we have to say, well, there's absolutely no chance that there's a baby alive, and we save the baby at all costs, even if the mother dies, then my wife would be dead. She was in a situation very early in a pregnancy, and they had to, whether the baby was dead or alive, she was going to bleed to death. And there was no other way to solve that but to go through the process, which would take the baby's life. And I think that we have to make sure that we temper our stand. Life is always what we're aiming for. But if the mother had died, the baby would have died too, even if it was alive. And so we must remember that we don't sacrifice a mother, a life, for the sake of standing on principle. The principle is life. Sorry. It just hits home. Next question, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. We're coming down to the end here. I do have some pretty heavy ones here at the end, so we might go a little over 90. I mean, 9 o'clock here, but there's some things I want to do. Yeah. In his state budget pitch, Governor Josh Shapiro called the Pennsylvania legislature to legalize recreational marijuana. Governor Shapiro is not breaking new ground. His predecessor, Tom Wolf, came out in support of legalization in 2019, unsuccessfully pushed it in his final years in office, and his Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman, doing a tour through the state promoting legalization of marijuana in a form of information gathering effort. Having seen other states legalize recreational marijuana and the effect or lack thereof on the welfare of the society, What is your position on the legalization of recreational marijuana? If you are in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana, do you have any limitations on legal amounts which a person can possess? And what is your position on incarceration for limited amounts? So do you think it should be legalized? If so, is there limited amounts? And should there be incarceration for limited amounts? That's my question. And I guess where did we start? We started with Mr. Anderson? Yes, sir.
There's a lot of parts to that question, but I'll focus it on this. I'm a teacher. For 27 years, the most dangerous thing facing our kids are drugs and alcohol. There is not one single kid that I've known of that has passed away from a harder drug that didn't start smoking pot first. It's that simple. I don't think the benefits of legalizing marijuana or any other drug outweigh the life of our kids. And it doesn't have to be the ultimate that they pass away. The kids that get addicted to the high, not even to the drug itself, but to the high, ruin their lives before their lives start. You see them come in first period, and for the first 4 periods of the day, they're out of it. So why would we think about giving them permission to do so? And I think it's a horrible policy to just say, well, they're all doing it, so let's just make it legal. Our goal as parents is to protect them. And I am a parent first. And as a state representative, I will not pass any law that it.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Cool. So I'm not just going to sit here and tell you what I think you want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth. In all honesty, alcohol is more dangerous than marijuana if it's clean and not laced with other substances. Legalization also takes money and power out of the hands of drug dealers, and it allows private citizens to make a choice and to know they are buying a safe product, just like with cigarettes, just like with alcohol. As prohibition increased crime and increased the risk of strong alcohol, so too it is with marijuana. Just like it is with alcohol and tobacco, it is a choice, and it is up to our parents to raise their children to know the danger of our choices and the difference between indulgence and overindulgence. I am open to legalization if it's done right. However, I also recognize that it adds a safety issue to businesses and roads, and I also believe that a representative should represent the people, not their own beliefs, and I will vote with how the majority of the district feels on that issue, not with what I believe on it.
Ms. Kelly.
Sorry. It's all right.
All right.
So I am in support of the medical marijuana being legalized, but I am not in support of recreational marijuana being legalized. I think it's, when people say it's going to bring a lot of revenues into our state. Well, I think balancing the budget is probably a better way to accomplish those kind of tasks. Harrisburg hasn't been the greatest at managing the money, and we look at the budget process for that. So as we might bring in a ton of cash on legalizing marijuana, and if we're not good at managing that, then 10 years from now, what are they going to ask? Well, we might as well just legalize cocaine now because we're out of money yet again. So I am not in favor of recreational marijuana being legalized. Just here in York County and Newberry Township, the police had to deal with a fatality, and it was due to marijuana use. So it impacts certainly our law and order. It impacts our citizens that are driving. We have a York City college person that is now in jail and was impaired by marijuana and killed somebody. And she's now in prison, and she is now going around and saying, this is the wrong. It cut me off again.
Mr. Kyle.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, so we should not legalize recreational marijuana. 14 people a day die from an overdose. Marijuana is a gateway drug. It leads to others. And today's marijuana is not what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. It is stronger. It is more potent. If you look at Colorado and what happened in the years leading up after their legalization of marijuana, their fatalities of vehicle homicides more than doubled in just a few years from people that tested positive for marijuana. It is dangerous, and it not only just affects the person taking it, but when they get on the road high, it puts everybody else in jeopardy. So we should absolutely not legalize recreational marijuana.
Mr. White.
There's a reason why we have a representative government instead of a natural direct democracy. There are times when your elected representatives have to make decisions for the better good, and oftentimes that's not the popular opinion. You have to make the hard decisions and not blow smoke up people's skirts. Marijuana is a dangerous substance. There's no question about that. We legalized gambling and we've achieved social ills associated with it. Was it worth it? We can debate that. But as was mentioned here with Colorado, a case I pointed out previously, it's a serious problem. Fentanyl is a big crisis we have in this country, and it kills people instantly. That's not marijuana. But the bottom line here is that proponents will dismiss the social ills of legalizing marijuana for recreational use. I'm the last of the baby boomers. December 25th, 1964, so I'm technically a baby boomer because it ran out December 31st, and I'm a Gen X, I guess, because it started January 1st. So you can probably guess that I was going to be opposed to it. And I'm opposed to legalization of marijuana, and that's how I would vote. Your representatives owe it to you to be honest to you, and I'm being honest with you. I will vote to oppose it.
Thank you. Mr. Albany.
Yeah, again, when I ran in 2022, I am on record. I support the legalization of marijuana, recreational use. Our small farms are struggling. Pennsylvania, one of the top industries in our state and in our Commonwealth, is agricultural and farming. It could be a huge boost, not just for the economy and for our tax revenue, but also to put our family farmers and support them as they continue to struggle against corporate entities. There are an awful lot of scare tactics mentioned up here, kind of confusing of the issues. I don't think anybody's advocating for marijuana to be in the hands of children. It's for, it should be regulated and handled much like we do alcohol from a state store perspective, overseen and regulated in that way. Small amounts of marijuana should not be criminalized, and we should exonerate those that have been incarcerated and served their time for such liabilities.
All right, Mr. Anderson, you started, didn't you?
I started.
You started it. All right. We're going to do some education questions here, and I hope you'll, again, stick tight with me here. This is a 30-second question, and I think we can boil it down to this pretty quickly without a lot of explanation. Just to get started with Mr. Davis. Who carries the ultimate responsibility for the welfare and education of a child?
So I'm going to start off by quoting the former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. It is the ultimate responsibility of parents to nurture and teach and raise their children. And when we take the role of the parent out of education, when we diminish the impact they have in their child's development, we are hurting our children, we are hurting our parents, and we are hurting the future of our society.
That's nice and concise. Appreciate that. Ms. Kelly.
Mm-hmm. I believe it's a one-word answer, and that would be the parent. Make it 3 words: parent and family.
Thank you. Mr. Kyle.
That are ultimately responsible, and that was the first institution given by God.
Amen. Mr. Wyatt.
Well, again, it's hard to disagree with the folks on the panel here.
And I'm not expecting you to. I'm not expecting you to.
Yeah, I know. Parents bear the ultimate responsibility. Unfortunately, not all parents are up to the task, and that's unfortunate, but that doesn't justify the state taking over that role. It is up to the parents and family, and if there are people nearby those parents who are not being good parents, it is incumbent on them to help teach and mentor those parents to do better for those children. It's up to the parents, not the state. We are wards of the state.
Mr. Holmany.
Boy, I'm really lucky because I had a mom and a dad who were both very active and involved in my education. I've tried to emulate that and be the same for my daughter, and she knows what the expectations are from us, and she knows that school is her number one priority. It sure would be nice, though, that we supported our families with economic policies that let them be involved in their child's education and not have to work 2 to 3 jobs to keep the lights on, to keep the heat on, and to make sure they do their homework.
Okay. All right, Mr. Anderson.
The question is, who's the primarily responsible? At Back to School Night, I have a slide that I share with parents that say this is my basic philosophy. Number one on that slide is, I do not have the right as a public school teacher to ever override your authority or your choices. It is a parent's right to choose what education they want for their child and how they are to be educated. There's not any type of wavering on that whatsoever. Parents are the ultimate authority on their child's education.
All right, we've got another lightning round here. I know that, again, we could talk very long on this, but please give us your the concise answer. All right, it's a tough one though. It couldn't be. We're beginning with Miss Kelly, right? Right? Is that right?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
What is your point of view concerning, quote unquote, the banning of certain literature from school libraries and class curriculum? Let me finish the question. Do you believe that our students should have access to all available literature, or do you believe that there is some literature that should be deemed inappropriate for minors in public education? And how would you determine what literature is appropriate for minors in public education system? Obviously, Playboy and Hustler are not appropriate, or even 50 Shades of Grey. But can you give me a quick 30-second idea?
30 seconds. All right. So there is no reason for the things that you just mentioned there at the end to be in the school. That's not educational. It doesn't bring value to the betterment and the development of the students in the schools. There needs to be some responsibility to read what is presented in the school and what's accessible. I know there's thousands and thousands of books that are available to the children, but you need to have somebody that's truly accountable to that, whether it's the certified school librarians or the board itself. I think the parent has control over that to bring awareness and make sure that there's a checkout policy if that's going to be in place. We consider Texas Bill 8.
Leave her go. Let her go.
To assign the ratings like they do movies. So I think that ultimately we need to make sure that it's age appropriate and the parents know exactly what the kids are reading.
Okay. We'll give you
Thank
a
you.
minute.
I'm sorry.
We'll give you 1 minute. Go ahead.
So the books that your kids read or want to read, they need to be guarded, and the school board or school administration or public library does not take the place of the standards that you have as a mom and a dad. When your kids walk through that school building, they don't overrule you. And so we should not be putting those things out there for our kids to read that are inappropriate. In my first year on school board, I put forth a policy to eliminate explicit material from curriculum. I was the only one that put that forward and stood alone, and that's okay. But that should be a decision that comes from your home, not from the school board or the public library. And so absolutely, there are things out there that we need to get rid of, and it's not indoctrination, it should be education, and that's the basis.
Mr. White.
It's perfectly normal. Books showing sex acts and nudity, it's perfectly normal. It's not perfectly normal. Children are vulnerable, and they deserve responsible adults around them. Pennsylvania's obscenity statute allows schools an exemption to have obscene material in their libraries. That is not acceptable. It's one of many states that does that. You know, it's one thing for the progressive left to talk about Florida and banning books. Not banning books, they're banning obscenities that children should be exposed to. 6-year-old children shouldn't be taught how to perform sex acts. It's morally irresponsible. They're not sexualized yet. Years ago, the progressive left went to great efforts in many school districts around the country to ban Huck Finn from our libraries by Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. Do you know why? Because it used a term from the vernacular at the time. The word was Negro. Well, we have an organization called the United Negro College Fund. That's not racist, it's not insulting. That was the vernacular at the time. How do you learn about it unless you can read it? We're not banning books, we're keeping obscenities away from vulnerable children.
Mr. Ullman.
I have great respect for our professional librarians in our public schools. They do a good job picking out age-appropriate material. I think we're trying to carve a little bit of a line. There are no obscene books targeted in the library for 6-year-olds. But having age-appropriate materials available to teenagers and young adults who may be curious or interested to reading certain topics, that should be their right. Now, there are a lot of parents that think they can impose their will on everyone's children. That's not the case. There are programs and policies in place in our public schools where a parent can decide what their children can and cannot check out of the library. That's the way it should be. But one parent cannot dictate what the rest of us or what other parents may allow their children to read.
We have a system of government, it's called federalism, and you have layers of government. The school board, the elected school board, is elected by that community, by the parents of that community to make those decisions. However, every single parent, if we go back to our last question, has the right to have their children educated the way that they want. And if they object to those kinds of books, whether it is somebody on the left objecting to something they consider racist, like Huck Finn, or it's somebody on the right objecting to something that is some sort of sexual-oriented book, they have the right to object, they have the right to petition their school board, and they have the right to have their child not have to read that book. So if we're giving it to the parents, and I believe firmly that they are number one, we should listen to them and what they want to allow for their own children, not what any state, federal, or any other government says. And I believe in local control of schools as much as possible. That's what federalism teaches us, that you have a local representative body of the local community. And I don't trust every librarian to make those decisions. That's why we need parents involved.
Mr. Davis.
Book bans are a pretty difficult topic because a lot of people are going to say, oh, it's a violation of the First Amendment. But if you read through Supreme Court precedent, the First Amendment does not protect pornographic material. It has no First Amendment value. And as I mentioned earlier, the family is the greatest form of government known to mankind. So as it was said earlier, parents shouldn't impose what they want for their child on other children. Yeah, I understand that. But don't put explicit materials in a library that naturally curious children can access. If you want your child to be able to read something like that, give it to them yourself. Don't let it be accessible in a library where other parents' children are going to be curious, pick up a book, and start reading something that their parents don't want them to read or don't think they're ready to read and understand yet. I think that's pretty straightforward.
All right. We've been around? I keep losing count. Were you first? I was first. Okay. All right. We're still in education here. Another tough one here. I'm going to give you 90 seconds on this one. Mr. Kyle, you're first. Do you believe that critical race theory should be part of the curriculum in the school? If so, where and how? Do you believe that the 1619 project should be used, or at least used as a positive resource in the curriculum? And what is your opinion of the the concept of white supremacy and white privilege, and how should that be approached in the public school system. There's a lot there, but it all kind of goes together there. So just kind of paste it together best you can.
All right, paste. So CRT should not be taught in schools. You are not an oppressor because of your color, and you are not a victim, because you grew up a certain way. That is teaching kids that they don't belong or to look at the bad in others. Drive down the road and look at a playground. You see kids of all colors playing with each other. That 6-year-old doesn't see their friend that is black as their enemy. What they see is their best friend that they want to share their lunch with or hang out at break or recess. Nor does it work the other way, that because I was born white, that all of a sudden I am better than anybody else. I am not. Martin Luther King said that, we have a dream where all men are created equal, that we are judged by our character, not the content or not the color of our skin, but by our actions. And that is key. This critical race theory shouldn't be involved. It leads down, it just brings out the worst in people, And then you start talking about history and when we were founded. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean you erase it. You teach history and you teach the good and the bad, and we learn from it in order to form a more perfect union. We are constantly getting better and we are constantly learning, but it comes down to respect for each other, and it doesn't matter what you look like or the color of your skin or where you're from, it's that respect. And ultimately, that's what it boils down to.
The 1619 Project is a race-hustling abomination meant to bifurcate the society on race. It was intentionally created by the New York Times to divide America on the issue of race, to lie about our history because we've stopped teaching it in our schools sufficiently. Mark may be the exception here, actually teaching history to kids. It's not common these days. Civics and history is forgotten. This country, when it was founded in 1776, had it been a country that came without slavery, would have been an historical anomaly. Every country on the planet had the institution of chattel slavery. This is a cudgel being used to divide this society. People need to learn our history. The first time the United States expanded its territory was through the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. That territory formed the states of Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. Those states were banned from having slavery into perpetuity from the outset in 1787, before we had a constitution under the Articles of Confederation. This country banned the importation of slaves in 1806. It took effect on January 1st of 1808. This is the true history of this country. Yes, slavery is an abomination, but it wasn't an American invention. And children are not racist. I know black kids who have white parents who've adopted them. They don't see their parents as white, and vice versa. Children learn racism and bigotry from adults who misbehave. And quite frankly, the whole thing with critical race theory is just distasteful. I'm sick of people dividing this country on race. We're one people, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Almany.
Chris, how many abominations are we up to? 15, okay. I just want to make this point very clearly to the entire audience that critical race theory is not taught in any school in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, okay? That's what's happening. It's a college level course. It's graduate level. It dives into other things. We do have to have some tough conversations on race in the country. We've definitely seen an uptick in incidents and things like that. There's a lot of different ways we can go about that. Certainly making sure that we stick to an actual natural history, natural account of our country's history is one way to do it.
Your back leg is about ready to go off the edge there.
Only 90 seconds for the teacher. Well, I will tell you this. I'm probably the only person in this room who actually read cover to cover the 1619 Project, and it's garbage. It's absolute garbage. A about 50 plus historians from real conservative bastions like Harvard sent a letter to say that it's flawed history. And that's what happens when journalists write history as opposed to historians writing history. As far as CRT, that is absolutely not true. It is taught in many schools, both rural and in urban areas, but they just don't call it CRT. So you don't call it critical race theory, but you're teaching the principles of critical race theory, which is to see every single part of society and history through the lens of race. It contradicts every single thing the civil rights movement in this country was about. Every civil rights leader from the 50s and 60s proclaimed we should not see race. We should see human beings as human beings. They flipped it. That now, not seeing it, that's all we should see. And it is absolutely divisive. And as somebody that has kids of all races and all different socioeconomic backgrounds, I'm telling you, they are united until adults with political agendas tell them how different they are and how one is better than the other, or one is the oppressor, or one is the victim. And the last thing I will ever teach to a kid is victimization. And that's what CRT does to our most critically at-risk communities in this country.
Mr. Davis.
So the day we stop talking about race is the day that we are all Americans. It's not African American, it's not Asian American, it's not white American, Hispanic American. We are American first and foremost, and we need to stop talking about race. As it's been said, children are impressionable. When we talk about race, we show them this side of somebody they're looking at, and they're not seeing another side of them. They are just seeing that person in front of them, and that is it. And if we want to talk a little bit more history, the people who started selling African slaves to the slave traders were African tribal leaders who were making money off of it. It had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with money. And so when we start victimizing and preaching CRT and going forth with affirmative action, these are anti-racism, but they are inspiring reverse racism. They are saying that people of races other than white can't get ahead, so we have to help them. That's not true. Everybody here in this country has the ability to grow up and have the pursuit of happiness and have a good life if we just stop talking about race and stop talking about all the victimization stuff. It's absurd, it's frankly disgusting, and like it's been said, as a child, I never saw race. And then people started talking about it in school, and all of my friends started talking about it, and it became something that we saw. So stop talking about it. We are Americans. Nothing more, nothing less.
Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I think there's been a lot of great points that have already been made, but I don't know why I would want to teach racism in a school. If that is taught, if that is in the curriculum, it must be called out and it must be removed. We cannot rewrite our history, but we must respect and learn from it. We must respect each other, we must have grace, and we must have compassion to each person as a human being.
All right, I've got two big questions yet, and then two final things for closing this out. It's going to take us to the end of the next half, end of the, they're at 9:30, but I'd like to do this. I'm going to combine a couple of these things here together, and this is you're not going to like this, but I'll do it in 90 seconds. But they are associated. One topic, again, these topics are not necessarily, though you may say, well, they're coming from a preacher. These are topics that are coming from the newscasts and society. It's where we are right now. Transgenderism is an issue in our community. In the last 10, 12 years, it has really come to the forefront. I hate to get into it, but it's something that we need to get into. What's your position? Again, I was talking about education here. What is your position of requiring teachers or faculty to address other students and faculty according to their preferred gender identity, pronouns or by traditional pronouns or accordance to their biological sex. Now, here are some other things until I think we'll kind of gather, I'm kind of toss all these into one pot here. Where do you stand on restroom and locker room usage? Transgender females and female sports. I think these all go together. And one last, is it appropriate for a school representative to ever counsel a student or help a student acquire medical assistance in the furtherance of their process of gender-affirming care without parental consent? And I know that's a mouthful, but I do think they kind of go together. Can you list them for me? Without a lot of philosophy, just tell us where you stand. That's what they're going to remember when they go home. Pronouns, bathrooms, sports, and medical care without parents' consent. All right, now Mr. Wyatt, I think you're first. Aren't you lucky?
Okay.
We're going to try to give you 90 seconds, not 90 minutes.
Okay. All right. All right, well, you've touched on a very hot button issue here, and it's very disconcerting and concerning. Let's be honest, folks. A small segment of our population always has been a very small segment of our population and continues to be, has gender dysphoria and identifies as transgender. These are people who deserve our compassion, particularly as Christians, Muslims, and Jews. We recognize, people of the book, that compassion is necessary. However, upending society over personal preferences is a very dangerous situation. In the English language, people playing around with using pronouns and identifying by plural pronouns simply creates confusion. Language is precise and serves a purpose. I speak 6 languages. You couldn't try this in German. It would be impossible for someone to pick a plural pronoun and try to explain themselves. It doesn't work. And until very recently, this was identified as a mental illness by the American Medical Association. Only recently did that change. So it's an evolving field from a social and a legal perspective, and very disconcerting about what people are talking about. As far as restrooms and locker rooms, our nation fought very hard for Title IX for women's sports so that women had a fair opportunity in sports and in education with scholarships. And scholarships are being taken away from female athletes by transgender athletes. If someone wants to create another category for transgender athletes of each variety, that's a possibility. But defrauding women who've earned their right to a scholarship in professional sports is unacceptable. And as far as a school official counseling your child for gender-affirming surgery, that's a violation of your parental rights. They have no role doing that whatsoever. We're done.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Mr. Olmany.
I knew this one was coming too. I'm going to start by telling you a story from when I was in high school. I was a senior and graduated in 1996. I had a group of friends that wanted to play field hockey. There was no male equivalent. So they were told, that's fine, but you got to wear the uniform. So they did. There was 4 or 5 guys, wore the skirts, went out, played, performed, and nobody cared. Now, I know our current representative, this has been a big deal for her. And I'd just like to touch on the medical care aspect a little bit as well. These kids are very vulnerable. And this is a very conservative area that doesn't always know how to deal with these kinds of issues. So I am respectful that and hope that they find somebody, be it a counselor, a mentor, a friend, that can help them be affirmed in the way that they need to be affirmed. And lastly, this kind of sums up everything for me. We forget the 11th commandment very often in this country. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, So you must love one another.
I think that it is an expression of love to allow children to be mutilated, their genitalia to be mutilated at some point later in their life, which they regret. This is an issue that's very personal to me. The first two, very easily. You have rights until you violate somebody else's rights. So women or males in women's sports, ridiculous. A biological male going into a women's locker room or women's bathroom should be prohibited whatsoever because it violates other people's rights. As far as transgender, these kids are being used. And this is an upfront and personal thing for me because I didn't understand it. I'm a Christian conservative. So a kid comes in to take a test. I say, don't take the test. Explain this to me. I don't understand it. And when you start sitting down talking to these kids, which I have for dozens and have relationships with them, you realize their issues are much deeper in whether they think they're a boy or a girl. But we tell them, or certain people tell them, dress differently, get a surgery, then you'll be happy. Their happiness is not about whether they think they're a boy or a girl. They have deep psychological issues, they have abuse issues, they may be on the spectrum, whatever it might be, and we need to get to the heart of what these kids' problems are. Because many of them, this is their way to get some sort of notice. Every kid wants to be noticed. And somebody doesn't have any other way of being noticed, it's a perfect opportunity. Now, I'm not saying that's for every kid, but we don't dive into their lives. We use it as some sort of political issue and a social experimentation, and they're right in the middle of it, and it needs to stop.
I'm going to apologize in advance because I know I'm going to offend some people in this room. Just please remember sticks and stones. So I don't care what you do in the privacy of your home. If you want to play dress up, go for it, but please do not expect others to conform to your delusions and affirm mental illness, which seems pretty absurd to me. And I'm also going to share a story from high school. So I was on the boys track and field distance team, right? I was one of the slower guys on the team, and had I decided to tell my coaches that I was a woman, I would have been in the state competitions. That's ridiculous. It's unfair to women. We worked hard to get women's rights and women's equality, and we're going to take it away because men think they're women. No, that's ridiculous. It's the same thing with the locker rooms. We cannot be infringing upon someone else's right just to affirm what someone thinks in their head is the truth. And going to the education thing, I don't think teachers or anyone else, counselors in the school, have a right to go over the head of the parent in matters such as this. And especially if I got to be 18 to get a tattoo or 21 to get alcohol, but I can be 15 or 16 and get life-altering surgery that I can't reverse, that seems absurd to me. It really does. And you know what? All through the pandemic, I was told to trust the science and get the vaccine. And truly, the hypocrisy is comedic because while the science of a vaccine is just a new theory, biology is millennia old, and I'm going to trust that.
Ms. Kelly?
Thank you. The fabric of our society is being challenged, and the youth are questioning where they fit in, and they're ripping families apart, and we're compounding the stressors of puberty. It's already pretty tough for kids to get through. I shouldn't have to worry about using a wrong pronoun. We are biologically who we are. There is a female, there is a male. From the bathroom perspective, there should never be a time when a man is in a bathroom that's a same bathroom that a girl could be in. That's just a non-starter. As far as medical care without the parent's knowledge, absolutely not. And I'd like to ask, where's Jane Fonda these days? When females are getting attacked and disenfranchised by things like this, as a woman, get out of my sports.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to respect to Mr. Almani, it's not about loving one another, but you love them by speaking the truth. But the fact that your friends were comfortable wearing skirts playing with girls is a whole nother issue. Kind of weird, but we'll leave it at that. Pronouns, it's male and female. When you go to the bathroom, you go standing up or you go sitting down. Trust the science, right? This is not a confusing issue, but yet we're making it to where kids are becoming confused. In sports, and we're dealing with this at Northern, and we're taking steps to protect kids because it's the right thing to do. And if I'm the only person in the room left saying that, that's okay. But you don't affirm something that is not possible. How much time do I have? Okay, sports. Absolutely. I should not all of a sudden be able to say that I can now win, the girls' track meet that was said. You were disenfranchising. Guys, if you stink at sports, find a different sport. Let the girls play their sports. And for a school rep to go above a parent, when your kid walks through those school doors, that school board or school administration does not take the place of you, and they should not go above your head. It is absolutely not okay.
All right, I have one last question. You started this, okay. I have one last question. This is a little selfish on my behalf, and then we'll have a final statement here. We have a Christian school here at our church, and I'm under the understanding, I've talked to some policymakers, some people from state government, that said that there was some discussion before the election of Governor Shapiro about school choice. Once he got into office, that kind of got set on the side. Now, running a Christian school, this has to do with whether a parent should have the right to give the children the education that they prefer. Now, with the taxes the way they are, it doesn't leave much money left in the budget for them to pay for a second education. Now, our local school board here in Dover pays $14,500 per student. And frankly, with some information I've gotten, money that comes from federal government, state government, is closer to the $20,000 mark per student. If the student has challenges and so forth, it could be running into $30,000 per student. We're trying to educate children for $3,500. We have teachers who want to teach our students, but we can't pay them a decent salary. Our teachers have to make, because we can't charge more from the parents, they've already bought an education, already paid for an education. And so our teachers are making less than half of the least paid teacher in our school district. Now, where do you stand on school choice and possibly allowing the money for the child, the student, to go with the student? I think Mr. Almany is first.
Oh, okay, cool. School vouchers are a scam. I was very disappointed in Governor Shapiro's support for them in the last round of budget hearings. I'm sorry about your teachers, but I think maybe they should form a union and try to get more money.
Where they're going to get it from? We're already paying it for it once.
If parents want to send their kids to a religious institution or a charter school, then that's fine, but they can pay for that out of their own pocket. Public tax dollars are for public schools.
That's true.
Okay.
I still have 50 seconds. I can go on. Sorry.
Are you done?
Well, no,
We'll go.
50 seconds.
Well, go ahead.
All right. So just to continue that, and just to expand on the
It
charter.
was 60
on the-
seconds. I'm sorry. It was 60 seconds.
I'm so confused now. All right. Anyway, charter schools are wasting taxpayers' dollars by the millions. There's studies have shown that $16.8 million of your tax money has been spent on advertising instead of educating children. And I should also point out that the local Dover school district here is $6.6 million underfunded, under adequate levels of funding. Most of that is due to the Pennsylvania current charter system funding formula that needs to be changed. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson.
No kid should be robbed of an opportunity because of their address. It's that simple. The most failing school district in central Pennsylvania spends $24,000 per student. 50% of that comes from the state. 40% their math and reading proficiency is under 20%, and they have a 74% graduation rate. And they receive more money than anybody else. Parents have the right to educate their kids as they want, and the money should follow them. And as a public school teacher, I'm not afraid of competition. You know why? Because I deliver a good product in my classroom. And so public schools need to stop being afraid of the competition and up their game. It's that simple. Teachers' unions are the biggest threat to public education in our country. I've been fighting them for 25 years. They do not have the best interest of students at heart. They have the best interest of teachers at heart. And a lot of times students get caught in the middle. So starting a union would be the worst idea that you could possibly have, because it always lends itself to a bad product for kids.
So I want to express a notion from Governor Shapiro's campaign for governor. Every child of God deserves a quality education. He supported that, and he supported school vouchers only until the party told him what he should and should not support. That, to me, is ridiculous. If you campaign on something, you stand up for it, you fight for it, you don't do what the party tells you to do. On the issue of schools, I do support school choice. I want to see our schools get more funding so that we can compete, like Mark said. But I think we also need to revisit our curriculum, revisit our strategies, and address the problems at the root, because throwing dollars onto a fire is not going to put the flame out. We need to figure out what's wrong with our schools, which in some cases is pretty simple, and address it. And then we can work even further to grow the amount of choices that we have.
Thank you. I do support school choice in all the options that we have available to us today, including our trades, including our music and arts that might be best for the child, depending on whatever the parent deems appropriate, whether it's for for educational reasons or for social reasons. They should have those choices. The money should follow the students so that we can facilitate that. I do also echo that the unions have a stronghold and manipulate the school districts. When we cannot tie, when the governor does a line item veto of the Lifeline scholarships that help the bottom 15% of failing schools, he is doing nobody any favors. So yes, I would support school choice, and the money would follow the student.
Yeah, well, Shapiro's MO seems to be that he makes promises and then doesn't keep them. So that works out really well. And to form a union, I think we all know how that goes in the end. So there's been addressed more funding. This new budget calls for $1.5 billion of more funding to the public education. So when is enough enough? Dover School District has a $65 million budget for 3,300 students. Are you saying we can't educate and we need more money? And yet we're going to make mom and dad pay for the quality education that they feel their kid needs out of their own pocket while they're trying to scrape by. I believe that the money should follow the kid. 15 states have some type of voucher system. It does work, and it can work We just need people to dig their heels in and actually stand up for the issue. The ironic thing is Shapiro actually wanted $7 billion for his school budget. So again, when is enough enough? If you look at, and I would encourage you all, Future Ready Index, see where your school lines up. Dover was above and failing in all but one category.
Mr. White.
Well, Josh Shapiro made a campaign promise and he didn't follow through on it, so he lied. Should that surprise anybody? Josh Shapiro was the Attorney General and failed to uphold the rule of law, allowing the state to violate Act 77 repeatedly. Of course, that was upheld by the Supreme Court 5-2, but the point here is that he didn't do his job as Attorney General. Why would you expect him to do his job as the governor? $8 billion is the amount of money that they want additional for education, the public education in this state, from the task force that was made up overwhelmingly of leftists in the legislature. $8 billion. The way that we pay for schools is a challenge, particularly when we talk about the way that money travels with the student. Having grown up all over the country and lived in multiple states and a product of public education throughout, not parochial, but public education, and having only learned long division in 10th grade because I was constantly moving, I can tell you that we do need to fund schools properly, but the way it's being done, the school choice is something that I very much advocate for. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate that. We've had a long night tonight. I think it has been good. I think it's been eye-opening. I think that it's been instructional, and I appreciate you being open and candid. I really do. And the last closing thing I want you to do is we're going to take 60 seconds. I want you to give me some closing remarks, and if that may or may not, but whatever you want to say there may include one or two goals or priorities maybe that you have if you were to get elected, what in your first session, things you would like to see happen or you may push toward happening. But we're going to give you freedom to say as you please. This is the last word that they're going to have on the way out the door. And so please take your 60 seconds and give us your heart. And I guess we actually start with Brother Anderson.
Oh, sharing your heart is my favorite thing to do. So, as I said earlier, I spent the last 9 days in Cuba on a missions trip. One of my priorities was to find out from the Cuban people, okay, what is the 65-year history like under socialism, communism, Fidel Castro? The country is hopeless, and we're not immune to that. All the things we talked about, big government, election integrity, freedom of worship, freedom of press, freedom of religion, the communist dictatorship in Cuba addressed all of those. And now you have a hopeless population that has nowhere to go and nothing to do. They make $5 a week. $5 a week. And the generous socialists give them 3 pounds of rice a month for that $5 a week. It is an absolute disaster, and we are not immune to any of this. Democracy is fragile. Freedom is fragile. And if anything happened in those 9 days, and I even thought about not going because I thought this campaign's really important, but I made a commitment to go, and I went. And it told me more about this campaign than anything else, and that is freedom is fragile, and as your state representative, I will protect that freedom at any cost.
Throughout this campaign, I've heard many questions about my apparent lack of experience, and I'd like to point out that not one of us on this stage has experience representing 60,000 people, at most a few thousand. Since I was in middle school, my peers have been choosing me to be a leader in nearly every activity, club, organization I've been a part of. I was one of 9 to be elected to serve on an international advisory board representing almost 9,000 undergraduates, and I have received international recognition for my dedication to leadership and service. I'm also the only candidate on this stage to have experience inside the General Assembly, and if I'm wrong, please correct me at the end of this, but I don't think I am, working in communications for the Republican caucus, where I watched every single session of the House, formed relationships with representatives and with staff throughout the building, which will give me an advantage through my experience to start and hit the ground running on day one. So yes, it's true, I don't have the same experience as a few of my colleagues here on this stage, but that does not equate to a lack of experience. Thank you, and go forth with Davis on April 23rd.
I just want to first thank the Lighthouse Baptist Church and Pastor Walsh, I appreciate it, and Gina Myers for putting this together, and all of you for sitting here for this long to hear what we all have to say. It shows your dedication to the process. My vision for PA includes three things. It includes prosperity. We must make PA a pro-business state. Our passionate entrepreneurs need freedom to realize the American dream and succeed in the vision of their success. We must reduce the regulations and address our tax structure to allow businesses to keep more of their earned income and reinvest in our communities. Preparedness. We must be able to access the immense natural resources to build our economy locally and be the keystone of the energy independence as a matter of national security. And we must support our law enforcement so that we may live safely under their umbrella of protection. And pride. We have lost trust in our government and really sometimes in each other. And we can really no longer discuss and debate. And we must restore the pride of our country and start working together or this will all be lost. Let's stop legislating based on who gets credit for it. Let's put the people first and the game. I bring 18 years of municipal government experience, 30 years of business experience, including being a business owner and signing in front of a paycheck. I'm ready to take a conservative fight to Harrisburg on your behalf. Vote Holly Kelly on April 23rd. Thank you very much.
So freedom is never more than a generation away. And on April 23rd, you get to be part in a critical decision. I'm not just another politician seeking an office. When this started, I took a step back from my current job, making 6 figures and living comfortably. And since the beginning, we've lived off our savings, and we've pinched pennies, and we've tightened our belts. And that's because I believe in these values that I'm fighting for. It's sacrifice. For so many of us, we've missed the service of public service, and I want to bring that back. Make ourselves available, be out there for you. I'm an unwavering advocate for limited government and individual freedoms. And again, I'm not running for an office, I'm running to serve you. I will wake up every day to make sure that I fight for you, the constituents of the 92nd District, to make your lives better and to fight against an overreaching bureaucracy that intends to take our freedoms away. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight and for your patience sitting here listening to all of us. Very interesting conversation for everyone, I think, and answers. I'm not a politician. I'm a servant leader. I've dedicated my entire adult life from the age of 18 until 55 supporting defending the Constitution at home and abroad. Not because it was easy, not because it paid well, but because it mattered. As a young man, I learned about the Constitution, about the history of this country, in the great city on a hill that Reagan spoke about. This is the last great hope for the world, and our Commonwealth and the federal government have been taking us down the river, and they're not giving us a paddle. I'm running for office to make life better for constituents in this district and to hold the line on our liberties so they're not abrogated. Things I'll focus on, elected to the legislature, is fiscal responsibility. That $3 billion increase this year, I'm going to fight against that. The fourth industrial revolution, which no one's talking about, we're being left behind with a few exceptions in Pennsylvania, artificial intelligence and robotics, and unleashing energy resources in the state and respecting individual liberties. I appreciate your vote on April 23rd. I'm the most experienced candidate up here, and I will serve your needs. Thank you.
Mr. Albany.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for the church and for everybody who stuck around and stuck it out. Thank you to the candidates for being here tonight and for the conversation. And with all due respect to the 5 individuals here on stage, I'm the only person that's going to be able to get stuff done up in Harrisburg. We have a Democratic majority in the House that will be expanded in November. We will flip the state Senate, and together we can tackle real issues affecting real people. There's been a 30-year corporate war happening in this state and in our country that has been squeezing the middle class. Costs have gone up, paychecks stretched thin. My parents were essential workers before we knew what essential workers were. Some months my dad joked, well, we get to keep the house for another month. And I know that wasn't always a joke. So I feel for all of you who have to do that, and we're going to work together to improve lives for the hardworking people of Pennsylvania.
Well, that brings us to a conclusion. It only took 3 hours, but I hope I covered everybody's question the best I could, as many as I could. The candidates are going to be over here at their tables for a little bit, and I guess until folks go home, and you can have a chance to talk to them, ask a follow-up question. And would you give them a hand? To sit up here and under fire for 3 hours is quite a job, and I just really want to tell you how much I appreciate it. Yeah, that's behind that door over there. You may want to do that first before you come back to your table. But I want to thank my staff for getting everything set up. I didn't set all this up. My staff set all this up, and they always do a good job. Appreciate that. And those folks who were able to get the word out that we had this going on, I appreciate that. We wanted to put it on a Facebook ad, but they won't let us do that politically. Can't do that. But you all handled it out, and I'm glad we had a decent crowd. And again, let me say this: although once they turn the microphone off, it won't be on our YouTube. They'll be okay, but you can get most of it. LighthouseBap.org. LighthouseBap.org. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a good evening. And happy voting.